I think we need to talk about Michigan. First off, uh, congratulations to the Ohio State Buckeyes. Thoroughly outplayed the Michigan Wolverines today from start to finish, despite a 6-3 lead by after the first quarter. Doesn't really mean anything. Ohio State usually starts off kind of slow and they progress as the game goes on. They've done that for years. This is nothing new. Um, Thoroughly outplayed Michigan at every position: running backs, offensive line, front seven, corners, everything. Michigan had essentially no answers for anything that Ohio State was doing, especially defensively. Um, Bryce Underwood looked like a deer in headlights for most of the game. He had one beautiful pass to, I believe it was Donovan McCulley, and outside that, it really wasn't anything. But they also didn't unleash him very much. I believe he had, off the top of my head, I want to say 12, maybe 13 pass attempts. I'll have to look into that, but that's not going to get it done, especially with a team like Ohio State who has three bona fide first round talents on the defensive line. Uh, Caden Curry is a problem. Uh, you got Sonny Styles is a problem, and Arvell Reese is objectively probably the best linebacker in the country. And I can tell you, as a Michigan fan, Arvell Reese actually gives me nightmares more than Downs does, and that might seem ignorant to some, but it's no disrespect to Caleb Downs. He's a bona fide top 10 draft pick in his own right. But Arvell Reese can do literally everything. You don't see guys nowadays who can run a 4.4 and weigh 240 pounds, who can spy a quarterback, who can rush the quarterback, who can cover tight ends. Hell, he could probably cover wide receivers if he really felt like it. Michigan doesn't have any of that. They don't have the horses on offense. Our tight end room, I think our tight end room has promise, but it's not going to get it done against a team like Ohio State. Ryan Day also, I can admit that as a Michigan fan, I've made fun of Ryan Day plenty. Some things I think are warranted, but at the same time, I think it'd be very ignorant to call him anything other than a very, very good football coach. And you can say that Michigan was maybe in his head a little bit over these last 4 years, but I saw a different coach today for them. He had his team prepared from start to finish, and he didn't seem flustered. It didn't seem like the moment was too big for him. So I'm going to give him all the credit in the world for having his guys prepared, having them ready to go, and it showed on the field. I don't think that it was a case of Michigan not wanting it or not being prepared necessarily. I think it's just as simple as Ohio State is here, Michigan is here when it comes to talent. This is clearly a better Michigan team than the one that we saw last year. However, and I've been saying this for months, I think that this is a better Ohio State team as well. This defense is nasty. I'm a Patriots fan. That's my pro team. So I've extensive experience in watching Matt Patricia coach football. And I can tell you that man played a pivotal role in 3 of our 6 titles. He is a teacher, I think, by trade. He's an incredibly smart individual. Bill Belichick loved him. And it shows because as good as the defense was last year, the way he was able to tap into these guys on defense and get the best out of them was really impressive to me. On to Michigan though, and I'm a Michigan man, as you some people might say. There's some major questions at hand here with this program moving forward. Biggest question is probably, is Sharon Moore really the guy long term? I think he's a good person. I've never seen anything, heard anything from him that made me question his integrity as a person. But at the same time, it takes more than just being a nice guy. to coach a football team, especially one that is on the scale of Michigan is a blue blood program that should really not have any problems finding adequate head coaches to lead their teams. Which is why the Brady Hoke and Rich Rod eras were so just detrimental. Honestly, set the program back about 20 years. We should not. We should be able to find guys like Ryan Day. We should be able to find guys like Kalen DeBoer, even, or even like a Lane Kiffin. These guys are winners. They're high level recruiters, and they know how to coach. And part of me feels like Jim Harbaugh kind of left this team out to dry, especially in the coaching department. And Sherrone Moore, for a large part of his tenure so far, has had to learn the job on the fly. And Michigan is not supposed to be the type of program where coaches learn on the fly. Michigan is supposed to be the type of program that available coaches chomp at the bit to have. It's a blue blood program, the winningest program in history. That means something. And I'm also a firm believer that coaches should have at least 4 seasons before the schools move on from them, or just for the simple fact that you got to give them an opportunity to develop their guys. But honestly, that's one of the problems I've seen so far. Is we're getting a lot of 3 stars and 4 stars and kind of hoping for the best. I think Andrew Marsh has a very bright future, assuming he stays at Michigan at all. I mean, it wouldn't shock me if there are other schools that, look for his talents, pay him a lot of money probably. I think the offensive line is incredibly raw and young, but I think that under a guy like Moore, who is an offensive line coach by trade, I think that they can develop. But we have 3 redshirt freshmen starting on the offensive line going up against a team in Ohio State who has, like I said earlier, 3 first-round talents just on the defensive line alone. That's not even counting the second or third level guys. So am I surprised by today's outcome? No, not necessarily. I wouldn't even have been surprised if we had won. Just it's a rivalry game, and it was at home, but Ohio State is clearly the best team in the country. I don't really think there's any debating that. There's no hate from my side. I like the trash talk. I like the kind of lighthearted camaraderie about it. But you're not going to hear me say that Ohio State's a bad program. You're not going to hear me say that they don't deserve their number 1 ranking. As far as the argument goes for their lack of competition, I think that is kind of a piss poor and lazy argument made by teams or fan bases like mine who want to cope a little bit. They can't control how good or bad their opponents are. They scheduled Texas in week 1, who in week 1 was the number 1 team in the country. Okay, well, it's not their fault that they ended up being 9-3 and not quite on the scale that people were expecting. Penn State going into it was, I believe, the 2nd or 3rd ranked team in the country. So blame Penn State, blame Texas, blame those schools for not doing what's necessary to be more competitive. Ohio State can only play who they play. And the fact of the matter is that they've beaten everybody they've played. They beat the dog piss out of Texas, despite the score only being 14-7. They did. They thoroughly outplayed them for 4 quarters. They beat the dog piss out of Penn State, and they beat the dog piss out of Michigan today. I don't like saying it, but it just is what it is. Bryce Underwood has lacked development thus far, and that is extremely concerning because not only did we pay $12 million for this kid to come here, which is, let's be honest, probably the only reason he came here, because he could have easily gone to LSU. He could have gone anywhere he wanted. He went here. Why? Who knows? Maybe deep down he really did want to go to Michigan, but it was probably the $12 million bag that the University of Michigan gave him. Number one recruit in the country. Okay, the kid's a freak athlete with incredible arm talent, does have a lot of potential. But for him to end the season with 9 touchdowns in 12 games, that ain't gonna cut it. Simply not gonna cut it. If I had told you back in August that I came from the future and that Bryce Underwood was going to have 9 touchdown passes all season, and that our starting running back, Justice Haynes, dog by the way, was going to get hurt halfway through the season pretty much, what record would you assume we have? I mean, with Coach Moore kind of seemingly learning on the fly a little bit, and with Bryce not getting the development that he needs, 6-6, maybe 7-5, but they weren't going to beat any of the good teams. He played well against Washington, cool, but that's one. I would say that aside with Central Michigan aside, because they're Central Michigan, and no offense to Central Michigan, but this is big time, big boy football, so I'm not going to compare them to teams like Ohio State. But outside the Central Michigan game, he had one really good game this year, and that was Washington. The fact that his best performances came early in the season and his worst performances seemingly came at the end of the season tells me that there is no real development happening with him behind the scenes. I don't know what the plan is from Sharon Moore. I don't know what the plan is with Chip Lindsey. But I heard other people on YouTube mention it earlier, and I think it was a good point that 2 years from now, maybe, you're going to have Sharon, you got Chip Lindsey, and you got Bryce Underwood. All 3 of them are not going to stick around together within the next 2 years. Somebody's going. Whether it's Coach Moore gets fired, whether Chip Lindsey gets relieved of his duties for not developing Bryce or for not devising a competitive enough game plan or offensive system, or whether it's Bryce who just says, well, I got too much upside and you're not doing your job. You're not developing me the way other schools could, so I'm a dip. I'm going to go in the portal. I can get paid somewhere else. So Michigan has to make changes. They don't have a choice. If they want to win, if they want to be on the upper echelon of college football, if they want to continue to beat teams like Ohio State and compete for real, they need to find a way to develop him. And Coach Moore, well, he has an obligation as the head football coach of UM to find a way. Being a good recruiter is great, but if you're not developing these guys, then it doesn't matter what star rating these kids are. You know, I know that a lot of people, Buckeye fans mostly, but a lot of people like to, crap on Jim Harbaugh. But Jim Harbaugh was able to take walk-ons and 3-stars and turn them into contributors, or real contributors on a national championship team. That's development. And so far, I have not seen anything from Sharon Moore that makes me excited as a fan for the future. The one other position group in this game specifically today that very much made me worried, very concerned, was the defensive line. I think we have very good linebackers. I think Jimmy Rolder's a dog. I think Jayshon Barham, when he's not headbutting referees, albeit by accident, but you gotta compose yourself, is a dog. However, the defensive line, which has been Michigan's kind of calling card for the last few years, got absolutely outmuscled. Ohio State's offensive line did about as superb a job protecting Julian Sand as you could have. I watched that game from start to finish. I watched every down, and I paid real attention to the defensive line because I knew that Julian Sand is not a scrambler, not really. He's probably a very good athlete. You wouldn't be at this level if you weren't, but he's not a real scrambler. I believe he had like 45 scramble yards on the season coming into today. I knew that you had to get pressure on him to have a real shot, and that kid was not under any duress. Not any at all. The defensive tackles got absolutely outmanned, just completely outmanned by the interior offensive line of Ohio State. The tackles stayed with our what I believe are still very good edge rushers. TJ Guy didn't do anything. Derek Moore didn't do anything. Jay Sean Barham didn't do anything. The tackles did their job. The interior line did their job. Bo Jackson is weirdly elusive. Even in snow, he was breaking dudes' ankles. Uh, Very talented young man in Bo Jackson. Kind of lived up to his name today. Although, nobody's ever really going to be the true athlete that the Bo Jackson was, but I digress. Just Ohio State wanted it more. I believe that. I think they just seemed more disciplined from start to finish. They made less mistakes overall. I think the coaching staff was better prepared. Players were better prepared. And at the end of the day, they simply earned it more. Nothing more to it. I'm worried about the development of the team across the board, mostly Bryce Underwood. I'd love to see Bryce get better. I'd love to see him stay in the maize and blue, but to be completely honest, I wouldn't be that shocked if he transferred. Maybe not this coming season, but at some point. And I believe that if Michigan was smart, they would do their due diligence, keep their eyes open, keep their mind open to possibilities of coaching changes. You have to do what you have to do, and he's a great guy, Sharon Moore, by all accounts. But we got to see more. No pun intended. And I couldn't help but notice too, at the end of the game, Ohio State's players, they're in the stands with the fans, interacting, taking it all in. And Michigan they're standing on the M, defending their M, like deer in headlights. It looked goofy, to be completely honest with you. I think it made Michigan look a little soft. It made them look kind of childish. I said it last year that a big reason why Michigan did what they did in planting their flag was because they felt disrespected. They were 4 touchdown underdogs. Nobody gave them a chance to win last year. And I think they took that personally. And so they did something that was probably the most, I guess you could call it disrespectful thing in the moment. But I get it. And I think they earned it, to be honest. I think they earned the right to plant their flag last year in Columbus. And I think Ohio State earned the right to plant theirs today. I'm not one to say just take shit from people. However, I think Michigan should have just manned up, held their heads up high, and just walked to the locker room and call it a day. And let Ohio State celebrate however way they see fit. Because Michigan earned the right to plant their flag last year, but Ohio State earned the right to plant theirs this year. And in my opinion, they should have, quite honestly. Because the mantra is going to be the same forever. If you don't want them to plant their flag, then beat them. Plain and simple. So, this one sucks. It's back to the drawing board. We got to dive deep into the transfer portal. There's a lot of top 100 recruits at the game today that Michigan hosted. I don't think any of them were impressed. So I'd be shocked if any of them really went with the maize and blue, outside getting a big bag like Bryce did. But we got to see what the future holds. And it's back to the drawing board. Prepare for a bowl game because you still have an opportunity for a 10-win season, which is not nothing. I think that's still something you can hang your hat on a little bit and build some momentum for next season, especially after going, an ugly 8-5 last year. So small progressions here and there. Try your best to go 10-3. And to the Ohio State Buckeyes, congratulations, you earned it. Is it going to be a winning streak for you? I guess we'll find out. But until then, catch you on the flip side. Go Blue.